And welcome back to Bengal Bites, the podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 93, Week 1 recap episode, where we talk about the game where the Cincinnati Bengals went on the road to Cleveland and got the victory for the first time in Week 1 since 2021, 17-16, a 1-point victory, not the most convincing or decisive of victories, but we'll get into everything that happened in this game, the highlights, the lowlights, interesting plays, nuggets that we want to discuss, and anything you may have missed if you didn't get the opportunity to watch this game. I'm not going to say this was the best game in the NFL. There are some more entertaining games out there, but, Battle of Ohio, it's never especially high scoring. Traditionally, the Bengals have gotten the better of the Browns, and this makes 4 wins in a row against these Cleveland Browns. That's always good. And there was no rain in this game, so that was another good sign for the Bengals. But we're going to go through everything that happened in somewhat of a chronological order, retell the story of the game as it happened. And I'm going to do something, I'm going to try to do it if I can throughout the season, try to do some of my in-game recording. I'm not going to call them highlights, but I did some check-ins from my phone while the game was going on to get some of the raw emotion while it was live. So I'm recording this after the fact because, I'm not getting paid for this. There's no commercials in this podcast. I'm not selling you anything. I'm just a dude talking about the game. And if you're you don't have to be a dude, but you could just be a Bengals fan out there who wants to hear somebody ramble about the Cincinnati Bengals, and you don't have to go to your local bar or whatever. You can pick up this podcast and share it with your friends, because this is like the least popular podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe you don't want to hear some ramblings of a incoherent Cincinnati Bengals fan. That doesn't matter. Look, we're going to talk about this game. I'm stalling because this game was painful to watch. So let's relive some of those memories, and then we'll come back and talk about the game. All right, we got this game started. Bengals started off hot on the first drive, methodical all the way down the field. Chase Brown was spinning off so many tackles in that first drive. Joe Burrow looking sharp, hitting T. Higgins right behind Andre Iosivas, double crossers over the middle. That spacing was kind of weird, but it was a good result. They got all the way down the field, got Myles Garrett to jump with that hard count from Joe Burrow, picked up the first down, didn't have to even get to fourth down, I don't think. Ended up with a nice Chase Brown run into the end zone where he just was very patient, and it started off to the right, and then he broke it back to the left, scored the touchdown. Browns come out on their first offensive drive. Joe Flacco was driving the Browns down. They went for it on 4th and short, handed it off to the fullback. Joe Flacco is looking crisp and sharp, unfortunately for the Bengals. And then right when Shamar Stewart, the rookie, got a nice play, tipped the pass out of the backfield, it was an illegal contact penalty on the linebacker, number 42, Oren Burks for the Bengals, gave the Browns a free first down. They're still on the move. It's 2nd and 4 at the 35-yard line. Handoff off the left end, short gain. Nice stop by Demetrius Knight, the linebacker, rookie. Browns have 3rd and short at their own 33-yard line. 2.5 minutes left to go in the first quarter. Browns are bringing in 3 wide receivers. They're going 11 personnel, 1 tight end, 1 back. Bengals have Osai and Hendricks on the edge, Hill and Slayton. Oh no, that's Chris Jenkins on the inside. Oh no, the laundry comes out. Pass interference on Cam Taylor-Britt. Why is he smiling and clapping? It's a penalty on him. He's like, ha ha ha. It's not funny. Unless it was on Jerry Jeudy. Pass interference, defense. No. Penalty on Cam Taylor-Britt. What is he so happy about? He just gave him a free first down. Oh my God, Moose Johnson is correct. What kind of defense is Cam Taylor-Britt standing there flat-footed while Jerry Jeudy runs past him for the first down?
on the catch on the sidelines. This is fourth quarter, 4.5 minutes left to go. Browns got a 1st and 10 on their own 13-yard line. Run it off the left end. Shamar Stewart can't bring the tackle down. Somebody just lost a shoe. Something's rolling around on the field. But Browns are down by 1 point because they missed the extra point on their touchdown. And so now the Bengals have taken the lead with a Evan McPherson field goal. But on the last drive, Bengals went 3 and out on 3 consecutive sacks. Joe Burrow got sacked by Myles Garrett and other people 3 plays in a row. And I cannot believe, while I'm watching the replay of the Browns missing the extra point, that they are sponsored by Dude Wipes in the stadium. So the Browns are brown and they're sponsored by Dude Wipes. This is disgusting in many ways. But anyway, it's 3rd down, 3.5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. Clock is ticking, 3rd and 9. Browns are huddling up. They've got all 3 timeouts. Bengals only have 1 timeout remaining. Browns come out. They got Njoku split out wide to the right. Fannin to the right. Double tights. Joe Flacco is confused. He doesn't know what to do with the ball. He's just going to take a sack. And Trey Hendrickson almost runs into the referee. 3 minutes left to go. Browns are just going to settle for a field goal, which they're hoping that their first-year kicker is able to make. Joe Flacco didn't like the look there. Kind of a questionable play call because Flacco didn't have a lot of options in the progression. Nobody was open. Good job by the Bengals defense covering the receivers. All right, now Andre Smith, 36-yard field goal attempt on 4th and 15. Good snap, good hold. Oh, he missed it! He missed it! Oh, yeah. Bengals got this shit in the bag. That guy is going to get cut immediately after this game. He's never kicking in the NFL again. Adios, Andre Smith.
Well, there we have it. That was not really a in-game summary, but it was just some brief windows into the insanity of being a Bengals fan while watching the game. So, let's discuss what we saw in that game. My overall takeaway from the game was not the most encouraging because, like I said, I predicted a conservative, what I thought, 4-point victory. I said it was going to be 24-20 Bengals. Ends up being 17-16 Bengals, so they still win the game, but by only 1 point win. They had been favored by 5.5 at the casinos and the betting lines, so the Browns won that kind of regard in terms of expectations. And Joe Burrow had his 3rd fewest passing yards in a game. Joe Burrow was 14 for 23, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, 113 passing yards, but he also took 3 sacks for negative 18 yards. So total, he was under 100 passing yards, 95 total passing yards in the entire game. And Jamar Chase only had 2 catches for 22 yards in this game. And if we look at the stats real quick, Jamar Chase, 5 targets, 2 catches. T. Higgins only had 3 catches for 33 yards on 4 targets. And then Noah Fant, the new tight end, was 4 catches, 26 yards, and a touchdown on 5 targets. Obviously, when Joe Burrow only has 23 passing attempts, there's not going to be a lot of stats to go around. So the statistics aren't going to look great. But as I have said in the past, anytime when the Bengals' best player, Jamar Chase, gets held to only 5 targets, basically only 5 touches of the football in the football game, there's been a serious lack of offensive strategy, and basically the Browns defense shut down the Bengals offense because they basically said, go ahead and let Chase Brown beat us or try to beat us, and we don't think he can. And they were basically right. It took a while for the Browns defense to kind of make adjustments to the Bengals offense because the Bengals did start off with 2 touchdowns on their first 2 drives to get off to the 14-point early lead. Or it wasn't a 14-point lead, but put 14 points on the scoreboard early in the game. But then they made adjustments. Myles Garrett seemed like he started lining up a little bit wider, and he was strictly going up against Orlando Brown Jr. on the left tackle. Myles Garrett was playing on the right side. I think he didn't want to have anything to do with Amarius Mims because Mims is a much more stronger athletic player than Orlando Brown Jr. at this point in his career. Mims is a lot younger, and it's probably a tougher matchup for Myles Garrett at this point. So I think Myles Garrett was trying to take advantage of Orlando Brown. They were still double teaming him, but on a lot of plays, Myles Garrett was still beating the double team, and he was just like a wrecking ball. There's especially a point in the second half where the Browns had 3 consecutive sacks on Joe Burrow. 3 plays in a row, he got sacked. He almost took a safety. He was going so far back into his own end zone, he had to like jump out of a pile of guys just to not get tackled in his own end zone. The Browns definitely turned it on, but I think they felt like if they had, stopped the Bengals offense on one of those first 2 drives, they would have had obviously a better chance to win the game. But the story of this game really comes down to the Browns kicker missing easy kicks. I mean, he missed a extra point, which is only 35 yards, and then he missed a 36-yard field goal. Both of them went wide right. The snap and hold were both good. He just missed the kick. And, that's just unacceptable. To be a professional NFL kicker, everything's correct except for you kicking the ball. And after the game, all the players and coaches for the Browns were saying the right thing about, hey, it's a team game and we all make mistakes and yada, yada, yada. But like I was saying, I would not be surprised if they are trying out new kickers, probably last night. Like as soon as that game was over, they're like, get 10 kickers over here to try out pronto because we can't be having that shit. And the Bengals also got kind of lucky in the regard that the Browns did not have their second-round running back pick, Quinshon Judkins, playing in this game. He was the one, I might have said sexual assault. It was domestic violence, same kind of, domestic argument, physical abuse on somebody of the opposite sex, whatever. He finally signed his contract to play for the Browns right before this game, a couple days before the game. But obviously that wasn't enough time for him to get fully up to speed and be able to play against the Bengals. And the guys that the Browns had out there at running back, Jerome Ford looked terrible. I don't even know how he's going to, realistically, he can't play because he had 6 carries for 8 yards, along of 2. And it was like he was running with his eyes closed or something. Like he was just running straight into the back of his own players, running straight into BJ Hill and not trying to fake anybody out. It was weird how bad Jerome Ford was for the Browns. But it made the Bengals defense look really good. It made Al Golden look really good. Logan Wilson had a pretty good game. He had a nice deflected pass early on in the game where the Browns had a screen set up to David Njoku. The connection between David Njoku and Joe Flacco was uncanny. And there was another play where Logan Wilson and Demetrius Knight both had a chance to tackle Njoku, but he ran right through both of them and picked up a first down, and that was pretty crazy. But Logan Wilson did break up a screen pass that was going to be another first down to Njoku out of the backfield. Logan Wilson had a pretty good game, better than what he looked in the preseason, but there was a question about him at some point in the game, someone in the second quarter, he was evaluated for a concussion because he went to make a tackle on the rookie Harold Fannin Jr. for the Browns, number 44. He's from Bowling Green, and I think he grew up in Akron, so a pretty local guy for the Browns. But he put his shoulder down into Logan Wilson. Logan Wilson took the brunt of it and then slammed back up against the ground with his head. And then he kind of was a little bit woozy, looked like getting up off the ground. He was evaluated for a concussion in the locker room, but then he came back into the game. So that's kind of concerning when they say, oh, and we saw him walking into the locker room with the doctors. And it's always, if they have to evaluate you for a concussion and there's like a question about it, obviously you took some kind of a blow to the head and were dizzy and all that kind of stuff. And so obviously he had some kind of injury to his brain. And then, so the question is, well, how bad is your brain injured at this point? These are the type of things you don't like to think about if you're a football fan. But as a player, I'm thinking about that kind of stuff because those can have long-term ramifications. And we'll have to see if it's one of those things, because sometimes those symptoms of concussion take a while to show up. It may, hopefully he's fine, but it could be something where today after the game, he feels dizzy or feels some kind of symptoms, then he'll, hopefully if he does feel that way, he'll report it. But something to keep an eye on with any player. Anytime a guy has a head injury, those kind of things can linger, and you just got to be careful with that kind of stuff. But we also saw Lucas Patrick go down in I think it was the second drive of the Bengals offensive game plan, which was in the second quarter, because both these teams came out with really long first drives that both ended up scoring a touchdown. The Bengals had a 12-play, 68-yard drive to start off the game. That was a good mix of run and pass, a lot of Chase Brown twisting and spinning off of guys, and there was a T. Higgins catch for 13 yards that got him down into close to the red zone. Chase Brown finished it off with a nice 5-yard run where it was designed to go to the right, but then he kind of hesitated behind his blockers. He was very patient and saw daylight to the left and broke it off to the left. Nobody was there. The defensive end on that side gave up the inside and went around to the outside, and there was a big hole there. He went in and scored. Then the Browns got it and responded with a 16-play, 67-yard drive that lasted almost 10 minutes, 9:50. And the Fox announcers put up a statistic that when the Bengals came back on the field for their second drive, it had been 30 minutes of on the clock real time since they had run their last offensive play. Quite a gap in the amount, but it was mostly because the Browns drive took so long, mostly because of penalties on the Bengals. There was it seemed like 3 plays in a row that the Bengals got defensive pass interference or illegal contact. There was the play where Shamar Stewart got a hand on the ball out of the backfield, and it was good play, but then it was an illegal contact on Oren Burks. Then defensive pass interference on Cam Taylor-Britt and DJ Turner gave the Browns multiple first downs. I think the Browns in this game had a total of 4 first downs off of penalties from the Bengals. So that was very frustrating, especially early on. But that injury I mentioned, Lucas Patrick, the right guard, number 62, I want to say, for the Bengals. He looked okay that first drive and a half he was in there, but then he had it looked like maybe another calf injury, something that he had been dealing with, I think, in training camp, and it may have been a reoccurrence of that. They showed him limping off, not really able to put any weight on I think it was his right calf, and he did not return into the game. That's going to be another storyline that we're going to have to watch. Dalton Reisner came in to replace him. He's the new signing who just was with the team for about a week and a half. He held his own. He looked okay. I mean, after he came into the game, Chase Brown wasn't as effective as he had been on that first drive running the football, and especially in the second half where the Bengals offense only had 7 yards of offense in the second half. They managed to get a field goal because the defense got an interception in Brown's territory and set the Bengals up pretty much in scoring position. The offense didn't have to go that far to kick a field goal. But it was a night and day switch between first half, second half. Bengals did pretty well. They had about 135 yards of offense in the first half. Then second half, 7 and only 3 points. I'm skipping ahead, but in the locker room after the game, Zach Taylor was saying, defense, great job. You really carried us, stepped up. You know, those 2 interceptions by Jordan Battle and DJ Turner, they got the game balls for the game. He was like, great job defense. And then he said, offense, we did a good job in the first half, but that's not good enough. In the second half, we'll step it up. But the thing that was weird to me, I say this all the time, but when Zach Taylor was speaking to the team, he was addressing it as if he was the coach of the offense only. He was like speaking on behalf of the offense as a unit and saying, offense, we didn't do a good enough job. And then he was speaking to the defense like, defense, we'll have your back. Don't worry about us. And it was like he was speaking to the other half of the team instead of speaking as the head coach of the entire team. That's the thing that really bothers me is it feels like he's out of touch with his own defense, the other half of his team, and he really has no clue what's going on with the defense. And it was like, oh, good job, Al Golden and defensive coordinator and defensive guys that I don't know anything about. But as the head coach of the offense, we'll step it. It was a weird disconnect there, and it seems like it should be him leading the entire team instead of like being closed off to half of his entire football team. But I digress. He also mentioned that this is, the 1-0 start. That's what we got to do, whatever it takes to get the victory, to get to where we want to be, which is, then he started talking about playoffs and the AFC North division. And he said the words Super Bowl after this game, which I know that's what you have to say, but it was weird. Like, he couldn't come out. Obviously, you can't come out as the head coach and be like, yeah, guys, we got lucky. The Browns pretty much gave the game away to us. And if their kicker could make any kicks, we would have lost that game. So he had to come up with some kind of story about great job, defense, carrying the day, blah, blah, blah. The 2 interceptions, the result was good, but they weren't especially great plays because if the Browns it was both tip passes. The ball went through the Browns player's hand and into the Bengals players on a deflection. So if the Browns players had just caught the football, it wouldn't have been a great play by the Bengals. It would have been, oh man, those guys were wide open and the defense wasn't really there to cover them. But they were like, lucky that the ball bounced in their direction in both of those instances. And lucky that the Browns kicker can't kick. And those are things that you can't necessarily count on. It's not like they schemed it up that way and they say, okay, we're going to let them drive all the way down the field on us, and then we're going to, do something that'll make them miss the extra point or miss this super short field goal. Now, to the Bengals' credit, when they missed that field goal, it was a very important play because the Bengals not only stopped them on 3rd and 8 at that point, or maybe it's 3rd and 10, but they got a sack on Joe Flacco that moved the ball back just that, extra 8 yards or whatever it was to make it a little bit longer of a field goal. Now it was a 36-yard field goal. So that distance really shouldn't matter in the NFL. Like whether it's a 30-yard field goal or a 36-yard field goal shouldn't make any difference. But that guy missed it, and who knows? But I'll give the Bengals defense credit in the fact that they didn't get completely run over. The Browns only got 2 yards of average rushing per carry. Now, the Bengals also averaged 2 yards per carry with Chase Brown and their running backs. That's a fact that Zach Taylor conveniently overlooked in his post-game press conference. He was like, defense, great job. You held him to 2 yards of carry. That's always a good sign. He didn't mention that. Offense, we also only got 2 yards per carry. Not good. But the thing that you could say that Zach Taylor was correct on before the game, they asked him what's going to be the difference in these type of week 1 close games. He said turnovers. And that was true. In the last year's opening game against the Patriots, Bengals had 2 turnovers, Charlie Jones and Tanner Hudson with those fumbles. This game, the Bengals were able to hold onto the football, no fumbles, no interceptions from Joe Burrow, and created 2 turnovers, partially because the Browns receivers couldn't catch. And there was a couple other times where the Browns had an opportunity to extend drives. I'm thinking of a pass to Jerry Jeudy on 4th down right in his body. I don't even know how he dropped it. It like hit him right in the numbers. Somehow he dropped it. He managed to avoid catching it. But, the Browns had opportunities in this game, and it felt more like they lost the game than the Bengals won this. And I hate to say it like that, but that's really the truth. When I wake up in the morning, I'm not like jumping for joy, like, yeah, this really feels good. It felt like the Bengals did everything possible to try to lose the game, but somehow the Browns outdid them and lost instead. Myles Garrett had 2 sacks in this game on consecutive plays. It was weird how the Bengals did a good job of mostly neutralizing him in the first half with double teams and chip blocks from running backs and stuff like that. And then the Browns figured out something, some kind of angle, scheme, whatever it was, to just dominate the Bengals offensive line in the second half. They weren't able to get any runs. Like Myles Garrett was making plays in the run and the pass. It wasn't just those sacks. He was coming in off the edge, getting penetration immediately and just tackling Chase Brown in the backfield for like a 1-yard loss, where they had been getting 5-yard runs in the first half. I don't know, maybe it was the fact that Lucas Patrick went out with the injury and Dalton Reisner is not as good in the running game. Whatever the difference was, the Browns seemed to figure it out and shut down the Bengals offense. So the concerning thing to me is the Jacksonville Jaguars are coming in next week to Paycor Stadium. They're obviously going to be looking at the tape and trying to figure out how can we shut down the Bengals offense like the Browns did. Not every team is going to have a Myles Garrett, a Denzel Ward, a Greg Newsome to be able to cover the Bengals receivers on the outside, shut down the run and all that stuff. But all these teams have their own quality players. They have their strengths and weaknesses. And when the Bengals have to play teams that I would say are more competitive than the Cleveland Browns. I mean, the Browns, like I said, they're probably one of the worst rosters in the NFL. And the fact that the Bengals had such difficulty beating them doesn't give me that much optimism. But like I said, when am I ever optimistic? Probably never. If the Bengals had beaten them by, let's say, 10, I would probably feel a lot more comfortable about this victory. But I think if they can figure out a way to not have so many penalties on defense, that would go a long way to improving the results. Because, some of those points from the Browns were gifts from the Bengals defense. And you could look at it from the opposite perspective of there was some drops. There was a couple drops. Chase Brown had one that could have extended the drive. I think they had to settle for a field goal or a punt because on one of the critical downs, Chase Brown was wide open, had it and dropped it. They tried a couple of deep passes to Jamar Chase, one on Denzel Ward down the right sideline that I think it just throw was a little bit behind and out of bounds and didn't really have a good realistic opportunity to make a play on it from Jamar Chase. The other deep pass, it was on 3rd and 3, kind of a strange time to go for a deep pass up the left sideline on Greg Newsome. And it was one of these back shoulder type of fade balls to Jamar Chase. And I don't understand. I get the positioning of the pass was good, except Greg Newsome just played it perfectly and got his hand in right at the last second when Jamar Chase was going to make the catch. I don't really love that play in that situation, not only because it's kind of a low percentage pass. You could say, oh, it's Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. They can make that completion in their sleep. But it is kind of difficult, and I would prefer it if Joe Burrow could try to overthrow the defender over the top. He's always like underthrowing it, giving the defender an opportunity to make a play on it instead of putting it in a place where only Jamar Chase could go and get it. The thing about Jamar Chase that makes him special is he has the high-end top speed to outrun everybody to the ball if you put it out in front of him. He's shown that time and time again where he has the ability not only to strategically kind of push off with his hand, but also just run away from guys and hit that top max, like almost 22 miles an hour to get away from guys with that extra burst. And if Joe Burrow could just throw it out there deep enough, I feel like Jamar Chase could make those plays. But I don't know, like Joe Burrow just hasn't shown great velocity and arm strength. If you go back and look at some of his tape from his first 1 or 2 years in the league, I feel like there was noticeably more zip on the ball. He's gotten better with his accuracy and his timing and all that stuff. But in terms of power throws, I don't know if Joe Burrow is as powerful a thrower as he was in his first couple of years in the league. So those are the type of throws I'm going to be looking for to have Joe Burrow prove me wrong. Like I said, under 100 yards of passing for the game isn't going to be enough to keep up with some of these teams. If you look at the Bills and the Ravens game last night, where both teams were scoring close to 30 points, Bengals are going to need to be able to go up and down the field and not just do this dink and dunk West Coast timing rhythm, because teams are going to catch on to that. They're going to I was going to say a bad word there. They're going to sit on those short routes. Easy for me to say. They're going to sit on the short routes and make the Bengals try to throw it deep. And the Bengals are also going to need a short running game, because that was one of the Achilles heels of the Bengals last year. It came back to bite them again in this game when they needed 3rd and 1. They needed a first down to keep the clock rolling. It was late in the second half. I think it was the fourth quarter. Bengals had a 1-point lead at that point, and it was 2nd and 11 because they came out 1st and 10. They ran Chase Brown, lost 1 yard. Then 2nd and 11, they threw a 10-yard out route to T. Higgins along the left sideline. Toe tap, but he was just short of the first down. So it's 3rd and 1, and they try another run with Chase Brown, and he's not able to pick up that 1 yard. The Bengals, they come out in one back shotgun. I couldn't tell if they had multiple tight ends, or I guess I could tell. I just haven't gone back and looked at it. But they were using multiple tight ends with Noah Fant, and I saw a little bit of Drew Sample, Mike Gesicki out there. I don't remember if I saw Tanner Hudson playing at all. I think it was mostly a Mike Gesicki, Noah Fant, Drew Sample game, and they don't have a fullback. But there was, Cody Ford was playing as an extra offensive lineman / fullback at different points in this game. But on this play, Bengals just couldn't get that 1 yard that they needed. And on those short yardage plays have been not as successful as the Bengals needed to be. That was a huge stop for the Browns defense that got them the ball back. But unfortunately, the Browns weren't able to really do anything. I think that was after that, the second interception came on another tip pass. But Joe Flacco, he was not mobile in this game at all. He looked 40 years old running around out there, but he was still able to throw and dice up the Bengals defense and their coverages for the most part throughout this game. Like, his statistics weren't that amazing looking, but a lot of it was because, like I said, there was multiple times where his receivers dropped the ball. Some of them were a little bit low or outside of their body. It could have been a little bit more accurate on-target pass from Joe Flacco, but there are some perfect passes, especially in the first half where he threw this touchdown. It went through like 3 Bengals defenders perfectly into the back of the end zone to Cedric Tillman for the touchdown. It was like, damn, that was a nice play from Joe Flacco. And if he can stay healthy, I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns are better than what I thought they were going to be. A lot of people predicted the Browns to be the absolute worst team in the NFL. Joe Flacco looked like a very competent quarterback, and if the Browns defense can play as tough as they did in this game, they will probably get some victories. But, a lot of teams throughout the NFL were surprisingly competitive. Like the Saints, they didn't get completely wiped off the field in their game against the Cardinals. Now, who knows how good the Cardinals are, but everybody thought, the Colts were going to be terrible, and they beat up on the Dolphins 33-8. Again, are the Dolphins just really bad? That is possible as well. The Titans hung in there and only lost by 8 points, 20-12 to the Denver Broncos, who everybody's predicting to be back in the playoffs this year. Carolina Panthers, they continued to look terrible and lost 26-10 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars, Liam Cohen, that was the first time in franchise history that a coach got a win in his first game as head coach. And that's the team that the Bengals are going to have to play next week. They got Travis Hunter. They've got Trevor Lawrence. They got Brian Thomas Jr. They've got weapons. I'll have to do some more research about their defense because they weren't that good a couple seasons ago when the Bengals were playing them. But they're 1-0. Bengals are 1-0. What else did I miss? Trey Hendrickson got a sack in this game. He was pretty quiet, noticeably quiet in the first half, and then he was able to get some pressure along with B.J. Hill. The only thing that kind of irks me, Trey Hendrickson, he does, his celebration. He always does the same, jumping out apart from everybody else, standing out away from the rest of his teammates, and then points up to the sky, to the Lord, because he's always, he's a very devout religious guy, which is weird because he's drawing attention to himself. He's not celebrating with his teammates. He's getting away from everybody else to stand out, to show everybody how religious he is to the Lord, which is weird. He's making this whole contradictory statement. And on the other hand, you see Myles Garrett, he doesn't do any special sack dance or celebration or anything like that. Differing styles. Trey Hendrickson, maybe that's one of the reasons that the Bengals are kind of not sure if they want to keep him around because, like they said, he's a unique kind of guy. So who knows what it's like to deal with Trey Hendrickson and his personality. But as long as he keeps making plays, he should hopefully get a second contract with the Bengals or most likely probably with some other team. As Joe Burrow pointed out in his post-game press conference, we'll take it. A win is a win. We did enough to get the job done. But at the same time, you feel like you kind of stole one. Stole one against the Browns. And against the Browns, the arch rival nemesis of this franchise, you will take those victories. A win is a win. These games can go either way. So it always feels good to beat the Browns. But it does kind of feel like they got lucky. The Browns lost the game, gave it away by their kicker not being able to make any kicks. And they're going to have to get a lot better next game. But like Zach Taylor said, put it all behind us, forget about it, move on to game 2. And it's a long season. Anything can happen. And we'll come back in the next episode with a preview of Week 2 against the Jaguars, the home kickoff game. I think they're going to do the open in orange, so probably everybody's going to be wearing orange again. Hopefully that looks good on TV and they get a win. Otherwise, those uniforms are going to be cursed and they're going to have to burn them because I think every time they wore the all orange, they've lost. Got to get a better outcome next time. But we'll discuss that and more in the next episode. If you've enjoyed it and you've listened all the way, somehow give me a thumbs up, subscribe, do all that stuff, share it with your friends. Give me an email, your comments. Let me know what you think about this game, this team, this podcast. Does this podcast suck as bad as the Bengals offense did in the second half? Let me know. Email me, Bengal Bites Podcast. Which is it? It's bengalbitespodcast@gmail.com. You could probably send it there and I'll get it and read it on the show if it's good, or if it's some kind of a AI something or other to sell me on stuff to make my podcast better. No, thank you in advance. So on that note, I'm going to leave you with a Houday 1-0 and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.